What are some of the top storylines in college football as we've reached the 100-day mark towards the regular season? We'll discuss what ESPN had to say coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks again for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there tuning in. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Jay, ESPN College Football released their top 100 storylines with, or maybe it's the top storylines. I didn't count them all. Maybe is it the top 100 storylines?
Well, no, it's 100 days until week 0. So they got like a whole bunch of just storylines and predictions. And it's a smorgasbord of things to talk about.
What's the one that really stood out to you the most?
I think the fascinating one to me was the first off was the must-know storyline. So they have a set of storylines to start things off that you have to know about. And that one leads right into Manny Mateer and Texas and Oklahoma's offensive makeovers. So I'm not sure who the writer is because I didn't see the actual name of the person, but last name Wilson. They kind of talked about
Wilson.
how
that's Dave Wilson.
Dave Wilson. There you go. And that's where we're talking about Oklahoma and Texas basically revamping both of their offenses. And the questions are, who is going to be the one that prevail? We've got young Arch Manning, who's going to be battling against a more experienced John Mateer. And then you've got Trey Wisner at running back, who's considered the best running back in the SEC right now, because he's the one with the most yards coming back, with the Jaden Ott, who has more career yards coming in from the pack. So you've got and quote unquote ACC, I guess you could say, but he got all his yards in the pack when the pack was actually pretty strong. So you've got a combination of those two battling it out. And I guess the big question here is, who do we feel like is going to have, who by the time they match up for Red River, who do we think is going to be in a better sync in comparison to the other? Right. That's the question.
I'm going to say John Mateer. I'm going to say it. I'm going to say that his first half of the season, I think, is probably going to look a little bit stronger than Arch's. Now, long-term, career-wise, Arch Manning could, and even 2025 season-wise, Arch Manning could certainly have the better season overall. He could have the better career overall. Mm-hmm. But given that he hasn't really played against any significant competition yet at the collegiate level, I'm sorry, Mississippi State, you don't count as significant competition yet.
Not first year Mississippi State. Yeah. Coach. Yeah.
But that game in the Red River Showdown and that game up in Columbus against Ohio State, those are going to be what tell us about who Arch Manning is. Now, if he goes up to Columbus and he balls out, okay, I'll sit back and I'll throw my hands up and say, okay, you guys got one, Texas. That dude's a dude. But I think the totality of the first half of the season, I think John Mateer could be having the better season. Again, Arch could have, or that first half going into Red River. Now, anything could happen in Red River. It doesn't matter who the better quarterback is, doesn't matter who the better team is. Anything can happen in Red River, and all bets are off.
100%. And that's the best part about Red River, and why we hype it up so much, is that just about anything can happen. Usually the team that's the
greatest
best
rivalry game in sports.
Right. Even the best team doesn't always win. I mean, us in the big game really duke it out for that a lot, because they seem to have a lot of that going on. And it's funny, I was doing a pod with one of my buddies that is unfortunately a Texas fan. So, he is one of those people. But we were talking, and someone in the chat asked the question, would you choose a national championship or to win 5 straight over your rival? Now, if you win the Natty, you lose 5 straight games to your rival. Which would you prefer? And of course, both of us said national championship. Sure, we have no problem with being Ohio State, who lost to Michigan 4 times so far, and they're probably going to lose to them again this year. I'm just going to put that out there in the universe. It's a very good chance there'll be a 5th loss, just because Michigan kind of has nothing to lose, and Ohio State's kind of like, end of the season, we're going to the playoffs anyway type deal. So I would take that in a heartbeat as well, but to me, I would like us to go out there and just beat them up. So I'm on your side, John. when I look at this game, I think the cool part about the storyline here is you've got Arch Manning and John Mateer, who have both been with their offensive coordinator / coach for 3 years. Mm-hmm. So they're both been in the same system for 3 years. So it's not like Mateer has been in there longer than Arch or anything, but the one with actual playing experience, pressure on his back to try to win games. I mean, heck, Mateer went off against Washington. Mateer had to play, so he's put up the 3,900 yards. He understands 44 touchdowns. He understands what needs to be done to help with some wins. And he's also gone through situations where he lost games and he couldn't will his team to victory. Now he's gotten that pressure and he's got that on his back. He understands what to do next and try to how to change things. Plus, he's going to be with a lot better talent in comparison, unfortunately. No shade, but just, it is what it is. His defense will be able to show up. Arch now has to learn those things throughout the game as he gets to Red River, which Ohio State should be a good test. So, John, I say I'm with you. I do believe that Mateer with a Jaden Ott should be able to, because truth be told, Texas offensive line is still young too. They've refreshed a lot. I mean, they lost a top 10 pick All-American, and they've had a couple guys that went to the draft that didn't get drafted. So, yeah, they're making changes as well. So the question is, will their line be ready, as me and you both expect ours to be?
Yeah, there's a lot of more experience along the offensive line at Oklahoma. Does that mean it's going to be as talented? We'll see. But you've got to go out and prove it. This is a big time year for Oklahoma's offensive line to show that last year was an issue with injuries and inexperience that really limited what they were able to do. Right now, they're healthy. Right now, they're intact. And so there's no real reason for this offensive line to not be much improved from what it was last year. And if they can be much improved, that's going to set John Mateer and Jaden Ott up to have big years for the Sooners and potentially push them into a position where they're contending for a playoff spot. And I think based on everything that we're seeing, based on what the schedule looks like, I feel like that's a real possibility for Oklahoma. I think this is a great opportunity for Brent Venables to coach himself off the hot seat, which is one of their other top storylines. As you look at the top coaches to watch, Venables is among them. He's sitting at number 3. Now, there's a lot of names to watch, like Marcus Freeman, who's coming off of a national championship game appearance. There's Mike Gundy, who many might argue is on the hot seat, but also it's Mike Gundy. Who else is Oklahoma State going to hire? Or James Franklin. James Franklin has had a lot of success at Penn State, but hasn't proven to be able to win the big one. So Venables is kind of in some good company. And then sitting there at number 1 is Bill Belichick, the top storyline in college football for 2025. But it's a big year, man. And I think Oklahoma's got a lot to prove. And I still need to see them prove it on the field. And when they beat Michigan in week 2, I think it's going to satisfy a lot of the worries and concerns that many people have about the Sooners, but they got to do it week in and week out. There's not going to be an easy game. After you get through your non-conference schedule, you're going to be in the grinder, and how you perform every single week is going to matter, especially if you want to make the playoffs.
Yeah, you got to take a trip up to Temple. Remember that. That's going to be an interesting one. We'll talk about all of those. If we break down rosters and stuff, I think we probably should do that next week. Let's go ahead and start looking at the comparisons early and start talking about that. But yeah, that Temple game is going to be a lot more intriguing than people think, even though Temple did fire their coach recently and lost most of their players. But yeah, it's going to be an intriguing one to talk about. Intriguing
in that we're going to be wondering how many points Oklahoma wins by, not will they.
Yeah, the fact that we're flying actually out to. I'm still baffled by the fact that we set up a home and home when Matt Rule was there. Yes, when Matt Rule was coach of Temple is when we set up this home and home. And Matt Rule has had 3 jobs since. So yeah, it's kind of weird that it finally shows up and now we're flying up to Philadelphia. But hey, for those that like to travel, it'll be cool to play up there in Eagle Stadium. You'll see a whole bunch of Sooners for us, Eagle Sooners there at the stadium probably for the game.
Yeah, so will Matt Rule be coaching Nebraska when Oklahoma and the Cornhuskers link back up here in the next few years?
That's a good question. Probably not.
Buy or sell? No, it's going to be interesting. Yeah, and that'll be an interesting trip. What's fascinating as you're talking about that is Oklahoma still hasn't made that makeup trip to Tulane yet. The game that got canceled because of all the hurricanes and stuff like that. And
they got moved to here. Yeah, we had that back-to-back home games. Yeah.
And so, yeah, they haven't made that makeup game up yet. So I don't know. I don't know if that'll ever happen, but anyway, just fascinating how non-conference stuff works down the road. But yeah, let's get up to Philly. Get you a Philly cheesesteak, because it's the only place I like to get Philly cheesesteaks. I'm sorry. If you've got a good Philly cheesesteak out there, you got to let me know in the comment section where it's at, because I have not been able to find a good Philly cheesesteak outside of Philly in my 42 years on this planet.
So
Coming up, we're going to talk what are Oklahoma's biggest question marks coming out of spring ball. We'll do that next here on Locked On Sooners.